Hey folks, what's up? Aaron here, Question Period Canada. How are you doing? A wild day on the Hill. Everybody showed up. Trudeau's there, Poilievere's there, Chrystia Freeland's there. All of Trudeau's henchmen are in the house, and a couple of Poilieve's. We're going to jump right into it in this condensed form, compressed capsule of entertainment and Canadian politics. Fun and information. It's going to be great. Let's get going. Pierre's going to kick us off. Let's go.
It's impossible to believe anything this Prime Minister says. First, when he gave $15 billion for one battery plant, he said there'd be no foreign workers. It was all a rumor. And then he said it would be one. And then his minister said there'd be a few. Now the company says it will be 900. This is $15 billion, $1,000 in cost for every single family. And now they're giving the money for 900 workers to do, foreign workers, to do a job that the Canadian Building Trades Union said could be done by our people, at a cost of $300 million of lost wages for our union workers. Will the Prime Minister release the contract so we find out how many Canadian tax dollars are going to foreign replacement workers?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to have to correct the facts in this House of Commons, given what the Leader of the Opposition continues to say. 2,300 local Canadian construction jobs and 2,500 permanent Canadian jobs when the Stellantis plant is completed.
That's right.
There'll be 3,000 jobs in the region when the Northvolt plant in Quebec is completed. You'd think the Leader of the Opposition would support those, but he doesn't. His uncontrollable urge to make everything a partisan issue means he's not supporting the investments that are going to help in Windsor, in St. Thomas, in Quebec, or elsewhere across the country. Right. He wants cuts. We want investments in the future of Canadians.
Poilievere just wants to see the contract. Can't blame him, I do too. But Trudeau does something here that concerns me as a voter. He says he needs to correct the facts again. He's always correcting the facts. Anything he doesn't agree with is a fact that's incorrect. It doesn't make sense anymore. Poilievere asks another question. Trudeau gets a little more heated.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Actually, we are the only party that has stood with Ukraine, Mr. Speaker, rather than trying to impose a carbon tax. But, you know, this Prime Minister, I understand what he's doing. He has imposed so much misery here at home, whether by doubling housing costs, forcing people into tent encampments, forcing 2 million people to go to a food bank. These are the problems here at home at the kitchen table. He is so desperate to talk about anything else that he avoids talking about what's happening in our own country. So will he answer the question? Will he take his tax off our farmers so our people can afford to eat?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition full well knows that 97% of fuel emissions in the agricultural sector, in the farming sector, are already exempt from our price on pollution. But he is so desperate to try and score partisan points that he actually refused to stand in support of something Volodymyr Zelensky asked us for in this House. How is the Leader of the Opposition explaining to Ukrainian Canadians right across the country that he no longer stands with Ukraine on things that they need right now to win this war against Russia?
Do you support the Ukraine? Me, sure, yeah. But I really support fellow Canadians. I think that it's a struggle here for regular Canadians, day to day, hundreds of thousands going to food banks, millions a month. It's wild. And now they're saying that I don't care about the Ukraine because I care more about Canadians. It's ridiculous. I don't know what they're doing. Up next, Poilievere again has another question for Trudeau, but Trudeau's not in the mood for answering. He sends in Karina Gould, and this pisses Poilievere off.
Chef de l'opposition.
Speaker, the Prime Minister continues to dodge the question about the tax he plans to quadruple on Canadian farmers. One farm alone in my riding is spending $150,000 a year on carbon taxes. And the Prime Minister wants to quadruple that number up to $600,000. That might put the farm out of business, which would mean we'd have to buy more foreign, expensive food from more polluting countries. And the Prime Minister is blocking a common-sense Conservative bill, C-234, in the Senate that would take the tax off our farmers. Will he commit here and now to another carbon tax flip-flop to carve it out for our farmers so our people can afford to eat.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
There's only one party in this House that's flip-flopping, and it's the Conservatives with regards to their support for Ukraine. That's Mr.
right.
Speaker, the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress has expressed its disappointment with the Conservatives for voting against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. In fact, they're calling on the Conservatives to change their position, to vote for the bill, and to support Ukraine.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker,
exactly
it's
what they
hard
should
to
do.
trust what the Leader of the Opposition says because he keeps changing his position. He says he supports Ukraine, but he didn't in his actions. He could demonstrate, direct his caucus to support this legislation and to support Ukraine.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, we're against the carbon tax deal that they put before the House, and we're against quadrupling the carbon tax on Canadian farmers. The Prime Minister can neither defend his position, nor does he have the courage to just admit, as he did on home heating oil, that he was wrong. He plans to quadruple the tax on our farmers who feed our people, which will send millions more people to the food bank. So will he rise today and show the courage to admit he was wrong and back Conservative Bill C-234 to take the tax off our farmers so that our people can afford to eat? Get up and answer.
Get up and answer the question. Poilievere sour, it was pretty awesome. But Trudeau didn't get up and answer the question. He sent in Karina Gould again. What a terrible situation. Up next, Michael Chong, an interesting MP from Ontario, very well spoken, but he has some questions about the Senate and why bills aren't being passed.
Member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, we used to live in a country where the governor regularly ignored bills passed by the elected Legislative Assembly. We used to live in a country where the appointed upper chamber used to regularly ignore bills passed by the elected lower chamber. That was a country long, long ago whose institutions were abolished after the rebellions of 1837. But now the unelected Senate thinks it's some sort of Chateau, clique, or Tory compact, ignoring a tax bill passed by this elected House. Again, when will the Prime Minister direct his representative in the Senate to respect the right and will of this House and pass the tax bill?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of respecting the will of this House, perhaps the leader of the Conservative Party would like to talk to the Conservative senators that sit in his caucus and ask them to pass the bail reform bill that was passed by this House of Commons. The Leader of the Opposition thought it was so important that he was going to recall Parliament last summer to pass it, and Conservative premiers regularly talk to me about the importance of passing that legislation. So perhaps he'd talk to the Conservative senators about that important bill to keep Canadians safe.
So Chong says that Liberal senators are holding up a bill in the Senate, but Dominique LeBlanc answers the question saying that the Conservative senators are also hanging on to bills in the Senate, stalling, delaying them, not letting them pass through. I don't know, maybe the Senate's doing its job? Probably not. There might be some political ties. Hard to tell. Up next, Clark Kent. You know, John Barlow, MP from Alberta, well spoken. He's got a question for Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of the Environment, and he's hitting hard, suggesting that Guilbeault might need to get gone.
Member from Foothills.
Here's the facts that the Environment Minister refuses to recognize. An Alberta poultry farm paid $180,000 a year in carbon taxes just to heat and cool their barn. When the Prime Minister quadruples his carbon tax, they'll be paying $480,000 a year. That farmer said he can't afford those tax hikes. His options are to pass on those costs to consumers or just call it quits. Is that what this Environment Minister wants? Is to bankrupt Canadian farmers and force Canadians to food banks just to save his job?
Yes. The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Here's what independent senators said about what the Conservative Party is doing in the House and in the Senate, Mr. Speaker. Senator Saint-Germain bled violently through his earpiece and stood before Senate Clement as we sat at our desk, yelling bullying and berating us for proposing this routine motion. She said the Conservative senator pointed fingers at another ISG members and suggested he would block work doing on the Senate's Human Resources Committee. And no matter how much the Conservative Party would like us to believe that this is about taxation, it is not. It's about bullying, Mr. Speaker. That's what it is.
Barlow's looking good, asking the right questions. Stephen Guilbeault, in his answer, though, says that Donald Plett, a Conservative senator, violently threw an earpiece. How do you violently throw an earpiece? That's just ridiculous. Shannon Stubbs is up next. She's an MP from Alberta. She's got some questions about food prices, inflation, and the carbon tax. Listen to how Freeland answers the question, though. It's delusional.
The honourable member from Lakeland.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll all look forward to see what those high carbon hypocrites come up with. But, Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, it's clear this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost. The Hunger Report said food bank usage has gone up for 7 years in a row. The NDP Liberals' carbon taxes hike food prices and force Canadians to skip meals or cut the basics. Common sense Conservatives will axe the tax for all for good, but a quick fix is Conservative Bill C-234 that will cut it from farm fuels. So, will the Prime Minister stop interfering with his senators and let them pass it so farmers can afford to feed Canadians and so Canadians can afford to eat?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the MP for Lakeland has the privilege of representing the amazing town of Vegreville. That town is a source of pride for all Ukrainian Canadians, especially from the prairies, for the amazing pisanka that the people there put up, pride in their heritage. Is she ashamed that her party has voted against Ukraine? I hope she is, because she should be.
So the House kind of blew up after that. Greg Fergus has no control. Both sides were upset that the questions aren't just being dodged, they're totally being avoided. Shannon Stubbs, back at the plate, takes another swing at the same question. Watch how Freeland answers.
Well, Ukraine needs weapons in Canada's energy, not the Liberals' carbon tax. And I'm confident that the Ukrainian farmers, who are my neighbours and friends and relatives, support that position. I'll never stop fighting for them. But that right there is the Liberals' distract and divide agenda. And it's only these guys who don't get that when you tax the farmers who grow the food, the truckers who ship the food, the store that sells the food, and the consumer that buys the food, Canadians can't afford the food. Yet this PM's going to quadruple his carbon tax, even though he already forces the people to choose between heating and eating. Now, he can help bring down those costs right now. So when will the PM get out of his former Liberal donor candidate MP senators and get them to pass the common sense Conservative bill?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister.
I am actually extremely confident that Ukrainian Canadians across our amazing country are in favor of our free trade deal with Ukraine. And I'm confident because the Ukrainian Canadian Congress said so. And I'm confident because President Zelensky wants that deal. And you know what? It's a great way to bring down the prices of food and fuel for the whole world by stopping Vladimir Putin. I just don't understand why these conservatives are standing against Ukraine. They're here.
So let me just get this straight. Shannon Stubbs is asking a question about grocery prices, and the answer has to do with President Zelensky and Conservatives not supporting the Ukraine? Come on, Canadians are starving. What is up? These Liberals are delusional. So that just wraps up the highlights from today, the best moments that I saw, the ones I enjoyed the most or learned the most. I find a lot of the Liberal answers very frustrating. I'm a voter. It's hard to trust these guys. It seems these days that the Conservatives, the opposition, are an easier bunch to trust. I've not trusted Conservatives before. I've been in that boat. But it definitely didn't feel like it does right now. Cannot trust the Liberals. They won't even answer questions, guys. Alright folks, thanks a lot for watching. I'm Aaron. Remember to like and subscribe. Also remember, I'm just a voter. This is purely entertainment, just for fun. With Canadian politics, we're having a good time, learning as we go. Check out some other videos. We'll catch you tomorrow. We'll be back with more. See you later. Have a good night. Stay warm.